The real estate agent's words echoed in Jen's head as she stood in the darkness of the tunnel. It's a foreclosure. Sold as is. $200. Take it or leave it. Her sister Michelle had called her and saying, "What are you going to do with a collapsing barn in the middle of nowhere?" But that was 6 weeks ago, before Jen found the door hidden beneath 50 years of hay. 6 weeks earlier, Jen stared at the notice from Family Services. Unsuitable living conditions for a minor child. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. They'd inspected her apartment 3 days ago after a neighbor complained. The social worker had been kind but firm. Black mold in the bathroom, a broken heater, one bedroom shared by Jen and her 9-year-old daughter Sophie. You have 60 days to find adequate housing or we'll need to discuss temporary placement for Sophie. Temporary placement. Foster care. They were going to take her daughter. Jen's hands shook as she checked her bank balance. $847.22. Her paycheck from the packaging plant came Friday, $580 after taxes. Rent was $650, due in 3 days. Sophie's inhaler refill was $90. The car needed an oil change. There was no path from here to a better apartment. No security deposit. No first and last month's rent. No way forward. Her phone buzzed. "Michelle, did you see the county auction listings? They're selling off foreclosures this week. Some as low as $500. Jen almost deleted it. What good was a foreclosed property when she couldn't afford to live anywhere? But she clicked the link anyway. 23 properties. Most were tax liens on houses that needed tens of thousands in repairs. But listing 17 made her stop scrolling. Lot 17. Agricultural structure, 1.3 acres, Millbrook Township. Structure uninhabitable. Land value only. Minimum bid, $200. $200. She had $200. The auction was Wednesday at the county courthouse. Jen called in sick to work, losing 8 hours of pay she couldn't afford to lose, and took 2 buses to get there. The room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Most bidders looked like developers or investors, men in work boots with contractor estimates already printed. When Lot 17 came up, the auctioneer barely paused. Agricultural structure, Millbrook. Opening bid $200. Jen raised her paddle. Her heart hammered. 200. Do I hear 250? Silence. Someone in the back coughed. The auctioneer scanned the room. Going once. Going twice. Sold to bidder 41 for $200. Just like that, Jen owned a barn. The property was 40 minutes outside town, down a dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. The barn leaned hard to the left, its roof half-caved. The paint, once red, had faded to the color of dried blood. Waist-high grass surrounded it. No power lines. No water connection. No driveway. Michelle had driven her out to see it. "Jen, this is worse than your apartment. What were you thinking?" "I don't know." Jen's voice cracked. I needed something that was mine. Something nobody could take away. They're going to take Sophie if you don't fix your housing situation. This doesn't fix anything." "I know." They stood in silence, staring at the wreck of a barn. Then Michelle sighed. "Come stay with me. I've got the spare room. You've got Marcus and the baby in a 2-bedroom. There's no space. We'll make space. I can't keep taking from you." Jen wiped her eyes. "I need to figure this out myself." She drove Michelle home and returned to the barn alone. She had a flashlight, work gloves, and a crowbar from the dollar store. If nothing else, maybe she could salvage some wood to sell. Reclaimed barn wood went for good money, she'd heard. Maybe enough to make a dent in the debt. The barn door hung on one hinge. Inside, the floor was buried under decades of rotted hay, rusted tools, and bird droppings. The air smelled like decay. Jen almost turned around. But then she thought of Sophie's face when the social worker had asked her about the mold in their bathroom, the quiet shame in her daughter's eyes. Jen started digging. She worked until sunset, clearing section by section. Mostly junk. A broken plow. Shattered mason jars. A steering wheel from something ancient. Her arms ached. Her lungs burned from the dust. But the physical work felt good. Better than lying awake at night calculating impossible math. She was about to quit when her crowbar hit something that didn't sound like wood. Metal. She cleared away more hay. A steel plate, 3 feet square, set flush with the floorboards. And in the center, a heavy iron ring. Jen pulled. The plate didn't budge. She braced her foot against a beam and hauled with everything she had. Metal scraped against wood. The plate shifted, then lifted. Beneath it, darkness and the smell of earth. Steps. Concrete steps leading down into nothing. Jen aimed her flashlight into the hole. The beam disappeared into what looked like a tunnel. Her hands started shaking. She should call someone. The police. The county. This felt wrong, like opening something that was meant to stay closed. But she thought of the social worker's clipboard. 60 days. Jen took a breath and started climbing down. The tunnel stretched 30 feet before opening into a larger space. Jen's flashlight beam swept across concrete walls, a vaulted ceiling, and rows of industrial shelving bolted to the floor. The air was cool and dry, surprisingly clean. And on every shelf, stacked floor to ceiling, were boxes. Hundreds of boxes. Jen approached the nearest shelf. The boxes were sealed with packing tape gone brittle with age. She peeled one open. Inside, wrapped in yellowed newspaper from 1974, was a porcelain figurine. Hand-painted. Delicate. Beautiful. She unwrapped another. A silver pocket watch, tarnished but intact. Another box held books, first editions, leather-bound, protected by tissue paper. Someone had stored their belongings down here. Or hidden them. Jen moved deeper into the space. More shelves. More boxes. She opened one at random and her breath caught. Jewelry. Not costume jewelry, real pieces. A ruby brooch. Pearl earrings. A man's signet ring heavy with gold. She pulled out her phone to take photos, but there was no signal underground. At the far end of the chamber, she found a filing cabinet. The drawers were unlocked. Inside were folders, documents protected in plastic sleeves. She pulled one out. An invoice from Rothstein and Associates, dated October 1973. Receipt of deposit, Kessler Estate contents, for 147 items cataloged. Storage contract paid through 1975. Jen pulled out more files. Letters. Contracts. Insurance policies. One name appeared repeatedly, Ernest Kessler. She photographed everything with her phone, knowing she'd need proof later. The last drawer held a leather journal. The handwriting inside was precise, controlled. November 3rd, 1973. The family doesn't understand. They want everything sold, divided, forgotten. But these pieces, they're not just objects. They're history. My father's collection, my grandfather's legacy. I won't let them liquidate it for quick cash. I've arranged storage. When things settle, when the estate taxes are resolved, I'll retrieve everything. They'll see I was right. The entries continued for months, growing more desperate. The legal fees are crushing me. But I can't sell. Not yet. Not until I can get fair value. My sister is threatening to have me declared incompetent. She doesn't understand value, only price. The storage company went bankrupt. I've made arrangements to move everything. A barn, purchase cash, off the books. Nobody knows. Nobody can force me to sell now. The last entry was dated March 1974. The doctor says 6 months, maybe a year. The cancer is everywhere. I've hidden the location details where Sarah will never find them. She'd auction everything to pay for treatments I don't want. When I'm gone, maybe someone else will find this collection. Someone who'll appreciate what it represents. Everything is documented in the blue folder. Appraisals from 1972. Some pieces will have doubled in value by now. Jen found the blue folder. Inside were professional appraisals, each item photographed and valued. She scanned the pages, her hands shaking. A Faberge cigarette case, $45,000. A collection of pre-war German stamps, $120,000. 2 paintings attributed to lesser-known impressionists, $200,000 each. The list went on. 12 pages of items, each one worth thousands or tens of thousands. The total appraisal from 1972, $2.4 million. Jen sat on the concrete floor, the papers spread around her. She tried to think. If this was worth $2.4 million in 1972, what would it be worth now? Triple? 5 times. She pulled up an inflation calculator on her phone once she climbed back to the surface. Her hands shook so badly she could barely type. $2.4 million in 1972 would be roughly $17 million today. But that was just inflation. Collectibles had outpaced inflation. Art had exploded in value. Some of these pieces could have increased 10 or 20 times. She needed help. Professional help. But who? If she called the wrong person, told the wrong authority, would they take it away? Claim it belonged to the Kessler estate? To descendants she'd never met? What'd she end up with? Nothing, not even the $200 barn she'd bought. Jen climbed out of the tunnel as dawn broke. She hadn't slept. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears. She drove straight to the library, free Wi-Fi, privacy, and started researching. Ernest Kessler, died 1974, estate contested by family members, never fully resolved. No surviving heirs found after 1982. The property had changed hands 4 times before ending up in county foreclosure, which meant it was legally hers. Everything on the property was hers. She found a law firm's website, Property Rights and Estate Recovery. She called from the library parking lot. When the lawyer heard her story, his voice changed from polite to razor sharp. "Don't touch anything else. Don't tell anyone. I'm sending someone today." The lawyer arrived with an appraiser at 2 p.m. They descended into the tunnel with professional lighting, cameras, and an air of reverent disbelief. Jen watched them work, cataloging, photographing, occasionally whispering to each other. At 7 p.m., they emerged. The lawyer's face was pale. "Miss Chun, we need to secure this property immediately. I'm calling a security firm. What you have down there?" He paused. "Our preliminary assessment, and this is very preliminary, suggests a collection worth between $60 and $90 million. Possibly more at auction." The number didn't feel real. Jen looked at the collapsing barn, at her dirt-stained clothes. "Say that again." $60 million. Minimum. Some of these pieces are museum quality. The fabric alone could bring $8 million at Christie's. There are stamps that serious collectors would. He stopped. "Miss Chen, are you all right?" She wasn't. She sat down hard on the ground, her vision swimming. $60 million. She thought of Sophie, of the social worker's clipboard, of the $847 in her bank account. She started laughing, then crying, then couldn't tell which was which. The authentication process took 4 months. Security teams guarded the property around the clock. Appraisers worked 12-hour days cataloging 447 items. The media caught wind of it in week 3. Local woman finds fortune in foreclosed barn, and Jen stopped answering her phone. But she'd already done the important thing. 2 days after the lawyer's first visit, she'd called family services. "I need to reschedule Sophie's housing evaluation. I'm in the process of purchasing a new home." It wasn't a lie. The lawyer had arranged a bridge loan against the collection's value. Jen bought a 4-bedroom house in a good school district for cash. When the social worker came for the follow-up visit, she walked through rooms with actual furniture, saw Sophie's bedroom with built-in bookshelves, inspected a bathroom with no mold and a heater that worked. "Miss Chun, this is quite a change." "I got an inheritance," Jen said. Also not a lie. Things are different now. The final appraisal came back at $412 million. The number was so absurd that Jen had to see it written down to believe it. The stamp collection alone, rare German and Russian stamps from before World War I, was valued at $89 million. A previously unknown Cezanne sketch brought $47 million at auction. The fabric pieces went to a private collector for $93 million. Even the smallest items, silver spoons, antique books, porcelain figurines, brought prices that would have changed Jen's life individually. Together, they transformed everything. After auction fees, taxes, and legal costs, Jen walked away with $287 million. She sat in the lawyer's office, staring at the bank statement, and thought about the $200 she'd bid on a collapsing barn because she had nothing left to lose. "What will you do now?" the lawyer asked. Jen thought about it. "I'm going to live." She started small. She quit the packaging plant, walked in on a Tuesday morning and gave notice, then took Sophie out for pancakes at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, just because they could. She established a trust for Sophie's future, bought her sister Michelle's family a house, paid off the medical debt that had crushed her for 3 years. But the moment that mattered most came 6 months after the first auction, when Jen stood in front of a property on the east side of town, an abandoned rec center scheduled for demolition. She'd bought it for $200,000. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to. "Mom, what is this place?" Sophie stood beside her, holding her hand. "It's going to be a community center. Free after-school programs, art classes, a computer lab, tutoring. Everything kids need when their parents are working 3 jobs and can't afford summer camp." "Like us," Sophie said quietly. "Exactly like us." Jen squeezed her daughter's hand. Nobody should have to live one emergency away from losing everything. Nobody should have to choose between rent and medicine. So we're going to help. The Millbrook Community Center opened 8 months later. Free programs for kids, job training for adults, a food pantry, legal aid clinic. Everything Jen had needed and couldn't find when she was drowning. She hired Michelle to run it. I need someone who understands what it's like, Jen said. Someone who'll fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Michelle cried when she saw her office. This is real? I'm really going to get paid to help people? You're really going to get paid very well to help people, Jen corrected. I need the best director in the state. That's you. The barn, once authenticated and emptied, was stabilized and preserved. Jen had it renovated into a small museum, free admission, open to the public, documenting Ernest Kessler's collection and the story of how it was found. A plaque near the entrance read, "Some things aren't valuable because they cost money. They're valuable because someone refused to give up on them." On the museum's opening day, a reporter asked Jen what she'd learned from the experience. She thought about the night she'd climbed into that tunnel, desperate and exhausted. She thought about the $847.22 that had represented her entire safety net. She thought about the social worker's clipboard and Sophie's quiet shame. I learned that sometimes the things that look worthless are exactly what you need, she said. And I learned that being broke doesn't mean being broken. It just means the system is designed to keep you down. But you don't have to stay down. That night, in their house with the working heater and the mold-free bathroom, Jen tucked Sophie into bed. Her daughter's room had bookshelves full of books, a desk for homework, windows that overlooked their garden. Mom, Sophie's voice was sleepy. Are we rich now? Jen thought about the $287 million in managed accounts, the investment portfolios, the trust funds. But she also thought about the terror of that eviction notice, the shame of food bank groceries, the exhaustion of working 3 jobs and still falling short. We're secure, she said carefully. We don't have to be afraid anymore. But Sophie, the money isn't what matters. What matters is that when we were at our lowest, when I had nothing but $200 in desperation, I took a chance. And it changed everything. Was it scary? Going down into that tunnel. Terrifying. But staying where I was, waiting for everything to fall apart, that was scarier. She smoothed Sophie's hair. Sometimes you have to step into the dark to find the light. She kissed her daughter's forehead and turned out the light. In the doorway, she paused, looking back at the room, at the daughter who was safe, healthy, and hers. No social worker would ever threaten to take her again. No landlord would ever tape an eviction notice to their door. Jen walked to her office, a whole room just for her work, with a desk Michelle had helped her pick out, and opened her laptop. The community center's website showed next month's programs: coding classes for teens, ESL tutoring, a job fair for people re-entering the workforce. Every program free. Every door open. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michelle. Single mom just came in. 2 kids, just lost her apartment. She looks exactly like you did last year. I'm setting her up with housing assistance and the job training program. She cried when I told her it was all free. Jen smiled and typed back. That's exactly why we're doing this. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, their tree-lined street was quiet in the moonlight. The barn was 40 minutes away, now a museum visited by thousands. Ernest Kessler's collection had found its way into the world, 50 years after he'd hidden it to protect its value. But its real value wasn't in the auction prices or the headlines. It was in this: a woman who'd had nothing, who'd been invisible and dismissed and 90 days away from losing her daughter, now had the power to make sure others didn't have to suffer the same way. Jen thought about the tunnel, about climbing down into darkness with nothing but a flashlight and hope. She thought about the $200 that had seemed like throwing money away. She thought about Ernest Kessler's final journal entry. Maybe someone else will find this collection. Someone who'll appreciate what it represents. She understood now. It wasn't about the money. It was about refusing to give up. About seeing value where others saw waste. About taking the chance when you had nothing left to lose. The foreclosed barn had held $412 million. But what it really held was proof that sometimes the best investment you can make is in yourself. Even when the whole world says you're worthless. Especially then.